Fleet Commander Vyrath stood at the center of his bridge and watched the blue planet grow larger on his view screen. Earth. The humans called it Earth. Such a simple name for such a simple world. He had been waiting for this moment for 3 long years. 3 years of travel across the dark spaces between stars. 3 years of planning and preparation. Now finally his armada had arrived. 200 warships hung in the cold void of space, just behind the planet's single moon. Each ship was a mountain of metal and fire, armed with weapons that could turn cities to ash in seconds. The smallest of his vessels was larger than anything the humans had ever built. Vyrath allowed himself a small smile. This would be easy. "Commander," said his second officer, a tall female named Keth, "we are in position. All ships report ready." "Good," Vyrath replied. He clasped his 4-fingered hands behind his back. "Tell me again about these humans." Keth pulled up the data on her console. "They are a young species, Commander. They have existed for perhaps 200,000 years, but their civilization is only a few thousand years old. They have not yet discovered faster-than-light travel. They are still bound to their single world. And their weapons? Primitive," Keth said with a slight laugh. "They have nuclear devices, but nothing that could threaten our shields. Their fastest ships take months to reach their own moon. They have no orbital defenses worth mentioning. Our scouts classified them as a level 2 primitive civilization." Vyrath nodded slowly. The Dominion Collective had conquered hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They had a system for everything. Level 5 civilizations were advanced enough to be dangerous and required careful diplomacy. Level 4 civilizations needed large invasion forces. Level 3 civilizations could be taken with moderate effort. Level 2 civilizations were barely worth the fuel it took to reach them. "What else do we know about them?" Vyrath asked. Keth scrolled through the data. "They are divided into many small nations. These nations fight each other constantly. They cannot agree on anything. They poison their own air and water. They destroy their own forests. Our analysts believe they may destroy themselves within the next few centuries without any help from us." "Then we are doing them a favor," Vyrath said. "We will bring them order. We will bring them purpose. They will serve the Dominion, and they will be grateful." He walked to the front of the bridge and stared at the blue world before him. It was a beautiful planet, he had to admit. Blue oceans, green and brown land, white clouds swirling in patterns across the surface. It reminded him of his own homeworld, long ago, before the Dominion had transformed it into a proper industrial center. "Sir," said another officer, "the High Council has sent their final authorization. We may begin when ready." Vyrath straightened his uniform. This was the moment. Thousands of years of Dominion expansion had led to this. Another world would fall. Another species would be added to the collective. The humans would learn their place in the universe. "Open a channel," he commanded, "all frequencies. I want every human on that planet to hear this." The communications officer worked at his console. "Channel open, Commander." Vyrath cleared his throat. He had given this speech many times before, on many different worlds. The words came easily. "People of Earth," he said, his voice calm and cold. "I am Fleet Commander Vyrath of the Dominion Collective. We have come from across the stars. We have watched your world for many years. We know your strengths. We know your weaknesses. We know that you cannot resist us." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You have one choice," he continued. "Surrender. Accept Dominion rule. Your leaders will step down. Your military forces will disarm. Your resources will become our resources. Your people will become our workers. In return, we will allow you to live. We will bring you technology. We will bring you peace. The wars that have plagued your species for thousands of years will end." Another pause. "If you refuse, we will destroy your cities. We will burn your fields. We will turn your oceans to steam. 1 billion of you will die in the first hour. The survivors will wish they had not survived. This is not a threat. This is a simple statement of fact." He nodded to the communications officer. "You have 12 of your hours to respond. Choose wisely." The channel closed. Vyrath returned to his command chair and sat down. Around him, his officers went about their duties with quiet efficiency. They had done this many times before. They knew how the next 12 hours would go. First, there would be panic. The humans would run through their streets, screaming and crying. Their primitive media networks would fill with fear and confusion. Then their leaders would argue. Some would want to fight, others would want to surrender. They would waste precious hours debating, unable to agree on anything, just as they had never been able to agree on anything throughout their sad history. Finally, they would surrender. They always did. No primitive species had ever successfully resisted the Dominion. The mathematics were too simple. You cannot fight an enemy who has weapons you cannot understand, ships you cannot reach, and soldiers you cannot kill. Vyrath waited. 1 hour passed. 2 hours. The humans were being slow, but that was not unusual. Their communications were primitive. It would take time for his message to spread around their world, time for their leaders to understand the situation, time for the panic to fade into acceptance. 3 hours. 4 hours. Vyrath began to feel slightly impatient. Perhaps he should destroy one of their smaller cities, just to speed things along. It was a common technique. A demonstration of power usually helped primitive species understand their position. "Commander," said the communications officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet." Vyrath sat up straighter. "Put it through." The view screen flickered. A human face appeared. It was a male, older, with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore some kind of military uniform. Behind him, Vyrath could see other humans working at consoles and speaking into devices. The human stared directly at the camera. His expression was strange. It was not fear. It was not panic. It was not even anger. If Vyrath had to describe it, he would say the human looked bored. "This is General Marcus Chen of United Earth Defense Command," the human said. His voice was flat and calm. "You have entered restricted airspace. You have 12 hours to withdraw from this solar system. There will be no second warning." The transmission ended. For a long moment, the bridge was silent. Then Vyrath began to laugh. He laughed so hard that his sides hurt. His officers joined in, their strange barking sounds filling the bridge. United Earth Defense Command. Restricted airspace. No second warning. The humans thought they could threaten the Dominion. The primitives, who could barely reach their own moon, thought they could frighten an armada that had conquered half the galaxy. It was the funniest thing Vyrath had ever heard. He wiped tears from his eyes and shook his head. "Prepare the fleet," he said, still chuckling. "It seems the humans have chosen to fight." He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. This should be amusing. General Marcus Chen ended the transmission and turned to face the room. The United Earth Defense Command Center was buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. 300 meters of solid rock separated them from the surface. The room was filled with screens, consoles, and the best military minds from every nation on the planet. "Well," Chen said, "they're here." A Russian general named Volkov nodded slowly. 60 years. We have been waiting 60 years for this day. "And hoping it would never come," added Admiral Yuki Tanaka of Japan. Chen walked to the central display table. A holographic map of the solar system floated above it, showing the enemy fleet as 200 red dots near the moon. His own forces appeared as blue dots, scattered and hidden across the Earth, the moon, and the spaces in between. "Status report," he said. "All orbital defense platforms are powered and ready," said a young American officer. "The enemy has not detected them. They still think our satellites are for weather and communications." "Good. What about the kinetic systems?" "Online and waiting, sir. We have 47 tungsten rod platforms in position. Each rod weighs 10 tons. At full acceleration, they will hit with the force of a small nuclear bomb." Chen nodded. "The lunar bases?" "All 3 bases are sealed and armed. We have 600 interceptors ready to launch. Pilots are standing by." "And the submarines?" 18 nuclear submarines have surfaced in designated positions. Missile tubes are open. They are waiting for the order." Chen took a deep breath. This was the moment his predecessors had spent 6 decades preparing for. The moment that had consumed trillions of dollars, millions of lives, and the complete cooperation of nations that had spent centuries hating each other. The moment that most people on Earth did not even know was possible. It had begun in 1947 in a place called Roswell. A craft had crashed. The beings inside had died, but the technology had survived. And from that day forward, everything had changed. The world's governments had made a secret agreement. They would hide the truth. They would pretend that life in the universe did not exist. They would let their people believe that they were alone. But in the shadows, they would prepare. Every major nation had contributed. The Americans brought money and manufacturing. The Russians brought weapons and determination. The Chinese brought numbers and discipline. The Europeans brought science and precision. The Japanese brought technology and sacrifice. The Indians, the Brazilians, the Israelis, the Egyptians, every nation that could contribute had done so. They reverse-engineered the crashed alien craft. They learned its secrets. They could not build ships that traveled between stars, not yet. But they learned other things: better metals, stronger fuels, deadlier weapons. They built bases on the moon, hidden on the dark side where no telescope could see them. They put weapons in orbit, disguised as harmless satellites. They trained soldiers for a war that might never come, and they waited. Now the waiting was over. Chen looked around the room at the faces of his fellow commanders. They came from countries that had been enemies for generations: Russians and Americans, Chinese and Japanese, Indians and Pakistanis, Israelis and Egyptians. In any other time, they might have been pointing weapons at each other, but the Roswell Agreement had changed everything. When faced with a threat from beyond the stars, humanity had found a way to work together. They did not stop fighting each other entirely. That would have been too suspicious. They kept their small wars, their border disputes, their political conflicts. But beneath it all, in the deepest secret, they had become one. The enemy thinks we are divided, Chen said. They think we are primitive. They think we will panic and surrender. He smiled grimly. They have made a very serious mistake. The Dominion scouts had watched Earth for decades. They had seen the wars. They had seen the violence. They had seen humanity's endless capacity for conflict and destruction. But they had drawn the wrong conclusion. They had looked at humanity and seen a species that could not stop fighting, a species that wasted its energy on internal conflicts, a species too busy killing itself to pose any threat. They did not understand that the fighting was not a weakness. It was a strength. Every war had taught humanity something. Every conflict had produced new weapons, new tactics, new ways of killing. For 10,000 years, humans had been refining the art of violence. They had studied it. They had perfected it. They had turned death into a science. The ancient Romans had built roads and walls to conquer their enemies. The Mongols had used speed and terror. The Europeans had developed gunpowder and colonized the world. The Americans had split the atom and ended a world war with 2 bombs. Each generation had found new ways to destroy. Each war had produced innovations that made the next war deadlier. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, drone warfare, cyber attacks, genetic modification. Humanity had never stopped improving its ability to kill. And now all of that knowledge, all of that experience, all of that 10,000-year history of violence was about to be turned against an enemy from the stars. "Begin Phase 1, Chen ordered. Across the planet, officers relayed his commands. Missile silos opened in Russia, America, China, India, France, Britain, and a dozen other nations. Submarine crews entered launch codes. Satellite operators activated dormant systems. Pilots on the moon climbed into their interceptors and powered up their engines. The enemy fleet sat behind the moon, completely unaware. They were waiting for humanity to surrender. They were expecting fear and panic and desperation. They had no idea what was coming. "Sir," said an officer, "all systems report ready. We are at full combat status." Chen nodded. He looked at the holographic display one more time. 200 enemy ships, the most powerful armada the galaxy had ever seen, against the entire military might of a species that had spent its whole existence preparing for war. "The aliens gave us 12 hours to surrender," Chen said quietly, "but we are not going to wait that long." He straightened his spine and gave the order. "All forces, commence attack. Show them what humanity can do." Across the Earth and the Moon, and the cold spaces in between, weapons came to life. Missiles launched. Kinetic rods accelerated. Interceptors burst from hidden hangars and raced toward the stars. Humanity was not going to surrender. Humanity was not going to negotiate. Humanity was going to fight, and for the first time in their long history of conquest, the Dominion Collective was about to learn what that really meant. The first warning came from a junior officer on the edge of the Dominion formation. Commander Vyrath, I am detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface. Vyrath barely glanced at the report. Missiles. Primitive chemical rockets. Our point defense systems will handle them. Yes, Commander. But there are many of them. Vyrath finally looked at the data. His eyes widened slightly. 3,000 missiles were rising from Earth. They came from every continent, from hidden silos and surface submarines, from mobile launchers and underground bunkers. They climbed through the atmosphere in waves, their exhaust trails painting white lines across the blue sky. That is more than expected, Vyrath admitted, but it changes nothing. Our shields can absorb nuclear blasts. Their missiles cannot hurt us. He was right. The Dominion point defense systems activated, tracking the incoming missiles with perfect precision. Laser beams lanced out across the void, destroying rocket after rocket. The missiles were slow, clumsy, easy targets. Within minutes, hundreds of them had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Vyrath relaxed. You see? They are wasting their weapons. They cannot touch us. But the missiles kept coming, wave after wave. The point defense systems worked harder, firing faster, burning through power reserves. For every missile destroyed, 2 more appeared. Commander, said Keth, her voice uncertain, something is wrong. What do you mean? These missiles, they are not targeting us directly. They are spreading out, creating patterns. Vyrath frowned. Patterns? What kind of patterns? Before Keth could answer, the first nuclear devices detonated. They did not detonate against the ships. They detonated in space in careful positions all around the fleet. Dozens of them, then hundreds, creating a wall of fire and radiation and electromagnetic chaos. The view screens went white. Sensors screamed with static. Communications dissolved into noise. What is happening? Vyrath shouted. Report! I cannot see anything, Commander. The radiation is blinding our sensors. Switch to secondary systems. Find out what... The first kinetic rod hit the ship to Vyrath's left. It was a simple weapon, really. A tungsten rod, 10 tons of dense metal, accelerated by magnetic rails to a speed of 50 kilometers per second. It had no explosive. It did not need one. At that speed, the energy of impact was greater than any bomb. The rod punched through the Dominion ship's shields like they were not there. Shields were designed to stop energy weapons, plasma bolts, laser beams. They were not designed to stop a solid piece of metal moving at 1% of the speed of light. The rod passed through the ship from front to back, turning everything in its path to fire and fragments. The ship broke in half, then broke again, then exploded outward in a sphere of light. Vyrath watched in shock. One moment, there had been a fully armed Dominion warship. The next moment, there was nothing but expanding debris. More rods came, dozens of them. The nuclear explosions had blinded the Dominion sensors, so they could not see the attacks coming. They could not dodge. They could not defend. Ship after ship died. The tungsten rods came from orbital platforms that the Dominion had thought were weather satellites. Each platform held 20 rods. Each rod killed a ship. In 30 seconds, 47 Dominion warships were destroyed. All ships scatter, Vyrath screamed. Break formation. Get out of the kill zone. The fleet responded, but slowly. The radiation from the nuclear blast was still interfering with their systems. Ships bumped into each other. Commands were lost in the static. Chaos spread. And then the interceptors arrived. They came from the dark side of the moon, where the Dominion scouts had never thought to look. 600 small, fast ships, each piloted by a single human. They had been waiting for this moment. They had trained for years. They knew they were not going to survive. They did not care. The interceptors dove into the scattered Dominion fleet like wolves among sheep. They were too small for the big Dominion weapons to track easily. They moved too fast, changed direction too quickly, attacked from too many angles at once. Each interceptor carried nuclear warheads. But they did not launch them. That would have been too easy to stop. Instead, they flew directly into the Dominion ships and detonated on impact. Vyrath could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were killing themselves. They were turning their own bodies into weapons. They were dying willingly, gladly, as long as they could take a Dominion ship with them. "They are insane," Keth whispered. "This is not warfare. This is madness." But it was working. 60 Dominion ships died in the interceptor attack. Their shields, their armor, their advanced technology, none of it mattered when a human pilot was willing to crash directly into their bridge at full speed. The survivors of the first wave tried to fight back. Dominion weapons finally found their targets, destroying interceptors by the dozen. But for every interceptor they killed, another completed its mission. And then the boarding parties arrived. They came in small, armored shuttles that slipped through the chaos of battle. They attached themselves to Dominion hulls like parasites. Fusion cutters burned through alien metal. Airlocks were forced open. Human soldiers poured into the Dominion ships. They were called Marines. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed for close combat. Guns that fired solid metal projectiles. Explosives that could be thrown by hand. Blades for when the guns ran empty. The Dominion soldiers had not fought hand-to-hand in 1,000 years. They had evolved beyond such barbarism. Their weapons were elegant, precise, designed to kill at a distance. The humans did not give them distance. The fighting in the corridors was brutal and short. Dominion soldiers fired their weapons, but the humans kept coming. Bullets tore through alien flesh. Grenades exploded in crowded rooms. Knives found gaps in armor. On one ship, a Marine unit fought their way through 12 decks in 20 minutes. They killed everything they found. When their ammunition ran out, they used their rifle butts as clubs. When their rifles broke, they used their hands. One Marine, his armor cracked and his blood floating in the zero gravity, strangled a Dominion officer with his bare hands, while 3 of the officer's guards tried to pull him off. He killed the officer anyway. Then he killed the guards. The Dominion had never seen anything like it. They had conquered hundreds of species, and none of them had ever fought like this. None of them had ever been so willing to die. None of them had ever been so hungry for violence. The humans were not just fighting. The humans were enjoying it. And the Dominion fleet, the mightiest armada in the galaxy, began to die. The eternal judgment shook as another explosion ripped through its lower decks. Vyrath gripped his command chair and stared at the disaster unfolding on his view screen. Half his fleet was gone. 100 ships destroyed in less than an hour. The humans had not stopped to negotiate. They had not paused to accept surrender. They had simply attacked again and again with a fury that Vyrath could not understand. "Commander," Keth said, her voice shaking, "we have boarders on decks 7 through 12. Security teams are engaging, but they are losing." "How is that possible?" Vyrath demanded. "We have the best soldiers in the Dominion. The humans are primitives." "The humans are not fighting like primitives, Commander. They are... I do not have words for what they are doing." Another explosion. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the ship, alarms were screaming. Vyrath turned to his console and accessed the High Council's classified files. There were documents about Earth that he had not been given before the mission. Documents marked unnecessary for subjugation mission and low relevance. He opened them now and he began to read. The first file was a history of human warfare. Vyrath read about something called the Stone Age, when humans had killed each other with rocks and sharpened sticks. He read about the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, when they had learned to make metal weapons. He read about empires that rose and fell, each one built on mountains of corpses. He read about a human named Alexander, who had conquered most of his known world before the age of 30. He read about a human named Genghis Khan, whose armies had killed so many people that the planet's temperature actually dropped because so much farmland returned to forest. He read about the Roman Empire, which had crucified thousands of people along its roads as a warning to others. He read about medieval wars where soldiers in metal armor had hacked each other to pieces with swords and axes. He read about something called the Inquisition, where humans had tortured other humans for having the wrong religious beliefs. And that was just the beginning. He read about the World Wars, 2 massive conflicts that had consumed the entire planet. In the first one, humans had invented chemical weapons that melted the lungs of their enemies. They had built machines specifically designed to kill as many people as possible. Millions had died in a single battle, fighting over a few miles of mud. In the Second War, they had done even worse. They had built camps designed to murder millions of civilians. They had burned entire cities to the ground. And at the end, they had split the atom and destroyed 2 cities in an instant. They had used nuclear weapons on themselves. And then they had built more. Virath's hands were shaking as he continued to read. He learned about something called mutually assured destruction, a human strategy where different nations pointed thousands of nuclear weapons at each other. If one nation attacked, the other would respond, and everyone would die. The humans had lived like this for decades. They had built enough weapons to destroy their world many times over, and they had kept them pointed at each other, waiting. They called it peace. The files went on. Biological weapons designed to cause plagues, chemical weapons that made people's skin fall off, drone aircraft that could kill without a human ever being in danger, cyber attacks that could destroy entire nations without a single shot being fired. And through it all, the humans had never stopped. Every war ended, but another began. Every weapon was banned, but a deadlier one was invented. Violence was not something humans did sometimes. It was part of who they were. Virath found a section titled Human Psychology. He read it with growing horror. Unlike most intelligent species, humans had never lost their predator instincts. They had evolved from animals that hunted and killed to survive, and those instincts remained in their brains. They felt satisfaction from competition. They felt joy from victory. They felt pleasure from destroying their enemies. Many humans did not just accept violence. They celebrated it. Their entertainment was filled with fighting and killing. Their sports were simulated combat. Their heroes were warriors who had killed the most enemies. The file contained a phrase that made Virath feel cold. Humans do not fight because they must. They fight because they want to. Violence is not humanity's curse. It is humanity's nature. Virath closed the file and sat in silence. He finally understood the Dominion's mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen a divided species, always at war with itself. They had assumed this meant weakness. They had assumed that a species that spent so much energy fighting itself would have nothing left to fight anyone else. They had been completely wrong. Humanity was not weak because they fought. They were strong because of it. Every war had made them harder, smarter, deadlier. They had been training for combat since before they had written language. They had perfected the art of killing over thousands of generations. And the Dominion had just given them a new enemy to fight. Not each other anymore. Not nations and religions and political systems. A real enemy. An outside threat. Something that every human could unite against. The High Council had thought they were invading a primitive world. Instead, they had poked the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They had given 10 billion natural-born killers a common purpose. The ship shook again. The sounds of fighting were closer now. Virath could hear gunfire and screaming from the corridors outside the bridge. "Commander," Keth said, "the humans have reached Deck 3. They will be here within minutes." Virath stood slowly. He pulled out his personal sidearm, though he knew it would do little good. The humans had already killed soldiers far better trained than him. "Open a channel to all remaining ships," he said quietly. "Channel open, Commander." "This is Fleet Commander Virath. All ships are ordered to retreat immediately. Fall back to the fold space threshold. Do not stop for survivors. Do not stop for anything. Run." He paused, then added, "Tell the High Council that we were wrong about this species. Tell them that Earth must never be approached again. Tell them." The bridge door exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through the smoke, their weapons firing. Dominion officers fell around Virath. Keth screamed and collapsed. Virath raised his sidearm, but a human bullet took him in the shoulder before he could fire. He fell backward, hitting the deck hard. His weapon spun away into the darkness. A human walked toward him. It was female, her armor covered in blood and burn marks. Her helmet was cracked, and through the gap, Virath could see her face. She was smiling, not a smile of joy or happiness. It was the smile of a predator who had caught its prey. The smile of a species that had been born to kill and had finally found worthy targets. She pulled a blade from her belt. It was simple, primitive, just sharpened metal. But in her hands, it looked like the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The High Council will hear about this, Virath whispered. They will send more ships. They will destroy your world. The human woman laughed. Let them come, she said. We've been waiting for this for a long time. She raised the blade. Virath, fleet commander of the Dominion Collective, conqueror of 30 worlds, died on the floor of his own bridge, killed by a primitive with a knife. And somewhere in the distance, other humans were singing as they fought. 17 ships limped toward the fold space threshold at the edge of the solar system. 17 out of 200. The Dominion warship Broken Dawn led the retreat. Its captain, a young officer named Torvak, had taken command when his own commander had died in the first wave of kinetic strikes. Now he stood on his damaged bridge, watching the blue planet grow smaller on his view screen. The battle had lasted 12 hours, the same amount of time Virath had given the humans to surrender. The irony was not lost on Torvak. Status report, he said quietly. His surviving officers looked exhausted. Many of them were wounded. Their ship was barely holding together. Engines at 40%, one of them reported. Shields are gone. Life support is failing on decks 4 through 9. We have lost contact with the Eternal Judgment. We must assume Commander Virath is dead. Torvak nodded slowly. He had watched the Eternal Judgment die. The humans had boarded it, killed everyone on board, and then deliberately crashed it into another Dominion vessel. 2 ships destroyed with one attack. Are the humans pursuing? Negative, Captain. They seem to be staying near their planet. That was the strangest part. The humans had won. They had destroyed the mightiest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. They could have chased the survivors and finished them off. But instead, they had stopped at the edge of their own solar system and let the remaining ships go. Torvak did not understand why. Perhaps they were out of weapons, perhaps they were tired, or perhaps they simply wanted witnesses. Perhaps they wanted someone to survive and tell the rest of the galaxy what had happened here. If that was their plan, it was working. The 17 ships reached the fold space threshold and jumped. The stars stretched and blurred, and the Earth disappeared from their sensors. They were safe. Torvak sat down heavily in his captain's chair. Around him, his officers were silent. There was nothing to say. They had just witnessed something impossible. They had seen the Dominion lose. The journey back took 3 years. When they finally arrived at the Dominion homeworld, they found the High Council waiting for them. The 17 captains were brought before the council to give their reports. One by one, they told the story of what had happened at Earth. The council listened in stunned silence. When the reports were finished, the High Counselor, an ancient being named Kravith, spoke for the first time. You are telling me, Kravith said slowly, that 200 warships were destroyed by a primitive species that has not even achieved faster-than-light travel. Yes, High Counselor, Torvak replied. You are telling me that these creatures flew their own ships into ours as weapons, that they fought hand-to-hand in our corridors, that they used their own bodies as bombs. Yes, High Counselor. You are telling me that they were singing while they killed our soldiers. Torvak hesitated. Yes, High Counselor. Some of them were. Our translation systems identified the songs. They were about victory, about glory, about the joy of battle. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Kravith spoke again. Show me the files. The classified documents about humanity were displayed on the council's view screens. The history of human warfare, the psychology studies, the analysis of their weapons and tactics. Everything that Virath had read in his final moments, and more. The council members read in growing horror. When they finished, no one spoke for several minutes. Finally, another council member broke the silence. We must send more ships, a larger fleet. We cannot allow this insult to stand. And how many ships do you suggest? Kravith asked coldly. 1,000? 10,000? Do you truly believe that numbers will save us against a species that considers death in battle to be an honor? Then what do you propose? Kravith stood slowly. He was old, older than any other being in the room. He had seen the Dominion rise from a single world to an empire that spanned the galaxy. He had witnessed the conquest of hundreds of species, but he had never seen anything like this. I propose, Kravith said, that we leave Earth alone. The council erupted in protests. The Dominion had never retreated. The Dominion had never abandoned a conquest. To do so now would be a sign of weakness. Other species might rebel. The Empire might collapse. Kreveth raised his hand for silence. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "The humans did not merely defeat our fleet. They enjoyed it. They sang while they killed us. They crashed their own ships into ours because they would rather die fighting than live in peace. They have spent their entire existence preparing for war." He looked around the chamber. "We conquer species because we are stronger than them. We are not stronger than the humans, not because they have better technology, but because they have something we lost long ago. They have the will to fight, the desire to kill, the joy of violence." He paused. "If we attack them again, they will not just defeat us. They will learn from us. They will take our technology. They will build their own fleet. And then they will come for us. They will come singing their songs of war, and they will not stop until every world in the Dominion is burning." The council fell silent. "The humans must never leave their solar system," Kreveth continued. "But we must not give them a reason to try. We will place a beacon at the edge of their system. A warning. We will tell the entire galaxy to stay away from Earth. And we will pray to whatever gods still listen that the humans never discover how to travel between stars." The vote was unanimous. A month later, a small Dominion craft traveled to the edge of Earth's solar system. It deployed a beacon and programmed it to broadcast on all known frequencies. Then it left and never returned. The beacon's message was simple. Warning: this system is inhabited by humans. Do not approach. Do not engage. Do not provoke. By order of the Galactic Dominion Collective, this world is to remain untouched until its inhabitants exterminate themselves or evolve beyond their violent nature. Any species that ignores this warning does so at their own risk. The Dominion will not send rescue. The Dominion will not send aid. You have been warned. The beacon was placed in the year 2024 by human reckoning. By 2124, humans had developed their own fold space drives. By 2224, humans had established colonies in 12 star systems. By 2324, humans had encountered the beacon and read its message. They did not destroy it. They left it in place as a reminder of the day they had proven themselves to the galaxy. And somewhere in the vast Dominion collective, an ancient being named Kreveth received the news that humans were now traveling among the stars. He closed his eyes and said nothing. He had hoped the humans would destroy themselves. He had prayed that they would evolve beyond their violent nature. Neither had happened. Instead, they had grown stronger. They had spread, and they were still singing their songs of war. The humans had a phrase that the Dominion translators had never quite been able to understand. It appeared in many of their communications, their art, their culture. Kreveth had spent decades trying to find the right translation. Finally, he understood what it meant. Humanity, fuck yeah. The Dominion had made a terrible mistake, and now only moments remained for their empire. The humans were coming, and they were hungry for war.